Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Dalmar, and we're going to continue talking about faith on the Sefer, this book from, I believe, letters and ideas from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I know we're called the Jewish View, but what these ideas are not exclusive only for the Jewish people, but even for the non-Jews, because everybody should have a belief in God. So the first idea is that, of course, that people have to make a living, and I know some people, things are down, they're unemployed, they're scared of being maybe fired from their job. These kind of ideas, and the retirement, everything's with money, which of course you do need money. You need a parnasa, you say in Hebrew, which is a livelihood. But here's a letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. God will provide faithfully. Greetings and blessings. I was very happy to receive your letter from the 5th of Nisan with the good news that everything turned out well. However, I feel that it is necessary to re-emphasize what I wrote in my previous letter, whenever we had an experience that enables us to see how God directs everything that happens in the world. We have an obligation to strengthen our trust and our faith in God. And in truth, it is not just a matter of faith, since also our intellect explains to us that things will turn out well, and the blessed Creator will give only success for each person to create the large vessels that will enable him to receive the spiritual and material loving kindness that God wishes to bestow upon him. All this is especially relevant during the days of Pesach, Passover, for these are days of faith and trust, just as they were for the Jewish people at the time of Exodus, when they went together with their wives and children into a desert land, a place of poisonous snakes and scorpions, relying solely upon the word of God, who instructed them to journey there. Let me intervene in a second to explain it, because it seems simple enough. But sometimes you have to take it away from the holy idea that they were special people, the Jewish people. But they're people like you and me, bottom line. Hey, they want to take care of their wives and their children. Now, why are you going out into a desert without an oasis and knowing where all your water and your provisions and your food is coming from? And you have to keep in mind also, they don't use numbers in the Bible, but you're talking about 2 to 3 million people, which that's like a major city in the United States today in the 21st century, and you're providing food for all of them. And you're saying, well, where's going to be the food? I mean, I don't see a truck coming through here. I don't see a supermarket in the middle of the desert, making fun. Of course you did. You don't see it today. You surely didn't see it 3,300 years ago. So how do you go into a desert when you have to take care of your family, your wife and your kids? Well, this was a remarkable act of faith. And afterwards, it continues. They saw that as soon as they had a need for it, there was manna, the manna that came straight from heaven for them to eat, fresh water from the well of Miriam, and success with respect to their material possessions, for the clothes that were upon you did not become worn out, end of quote. So they had their clothes made for them, they had water, they had food, and there's no normal situation that's going to get them there. But on the other hand, if they had faith, God will provide. And so too in every generation and every day, a person is required to regard himself as if he too went out from Egypt. And when we conduct our lives with that kind of faith and trust, or at least with some portion of that faith and trust, then God will faithfully provide us with what we need in both material and spiritual matters. And God will help us to see this and to see it quickly, with a blessing for a kosher and a joyous holiday. And the Rebbe concludes that letter. So again, we see that, just saying, well, there were miracles one upon a time. Get that question many times. How well, you say the Nile River turned to blood. Fine, I'd believe in God too. Let him make the Hudson River turn into blood. Then maybe I'd believe him. But miracles happen today, maybe in a hidden way. The food doesn't come straight from heaven. The waters just don't open up in your backyard. But in any case, if you have faith, you believe that God will provide, even though it's through more normal, natural means. Another letter from the Rebbe. In response to your letter in which you asked the question, why are there so few people in the world who believe in God, in His Torah and His commandments? Well, it's very interesting. Let me frame the question, in a different way, and that would be that we're in a democratic situation. If majority people want this for the president, he's the president. Majority want the other person, they're the president. And they're right. The majority rules. So in Torah, you could say the same thing. Well, how many people are adhering to the Bible? It's not the majority, so maybe it's not right. First of all, the Rebbe continues, this has already been said by our Holy Torah where it is written, for you are the smallest of all the nations. God created the world in accordance with His wisdom and His will. According to the Targum Yushalmi, one of the commentaries, the first words of the Torah, Bereshis Bora, which literally in Hebrew would mean in the beginning He created, teach us that God uses wisdom to create the world. How did He create the world? They interpreted with wisdom. It's not a just blown up world, which is really a subject in its own right, but just a few words, it's just a big bang, and we just happen to be here, and all the plants and the flowers, and it's just the world happens to be. It's all totally directed with wisdom, with intellect, and the world, as you see, there is science, of course. You could learn things. There's a system to the world. And God's wisdom and His knowledge are united with His own infinite being. And since there is no way for a person to understand God's infinite being, it is written, will you find the way to understand God? Meaning there's no way you'll really understand God's plan. As it has been explained at length in the works of the Rambam, who is Maimonides, basic commentary in Judaism, and a number of other places. Nevertheless, we do find a bit of an explanation for this in the writings of our sages, meaning ultimately you can't understand Torah or God. On the other hand, certain ways you can understand it. For example, the Rambam, again Maimonides, discusses it near the end of the introduction to his commentary on the Mishnah, in the lines that begin, one question remains. Why did God bring into existence all the people? For we see that most people, the Rambam explains that the ultimate purpose of creation is fulfilled by a person who has wisdom and meditates upon the unity of the Creator. Other people were created in order to help this person to fulfill his task, and they do so by providing him with his material needs and with companionship. Really goes together with an idea from the Talmud. It says every person should see themselves as if they are the center of the world. For my sake, the world was created. Doesn't mean you have to be a narcissistic person and everything is for me, but in a way it is very empowering that you think the world is for you, but again, it's also a job. You have to correct the world. It's your world. Someone say, well, this is your room, and it's a mess. They're very nice, it's my room, but maybe you ought to clean it up. So that's also the idea. The world's here for you to help you, but on the other hand, you have to help the world and correct it and make it a better world. The main point to this is that quality is more important than quantity. In other words, a superior quality that exists within a physical entity whose quantity is limited will outweigh even the greatest quantity when its quality is low. Many times the Rebbe doesn't get into it. He explained in a different place where we see that, and we're in the nuclear age. What you can have planes, 20 planes, and mortar shells and battleships, and one bomb. Of course, if it's an atomic bomb, we should know from it that God should save us from it. But we see from in Japan in World War II that one bomb blew apart more than 20, I don't know how many planes and battleships and bombs. So it's atomic, so that's from the atom, splitting the atom. So we see clearly in science, quality is more important than quantity. So again, people could say, well, how many good people there are. It's not right is not according to democracy if everybody agrees to it. Right is right if God says so in the Torah. Now this is very interesting also. The Torah gives a physician the power to do only one thing, to heal. Blessings and greetings. My opinion on all of this is that if you have the approval of two doctors, you can rely on your decision, and God will give the doctors the knowledge they need in order to choose the proper treatment for your daughter. May she be well and for many years. The doctors should use the power of healing that has been given to them by the Torah, but aside from that power to heal, they have no authority whatsoever. Hence, if you hear a negative prognosis from a doctor, you should not pay any attention to it at all. You should view it as no more than a trial in which God is testing to see whether you and your husband have enough faith and trust in His power. And the more you strengthen your trust in God, the more quickly you will see a tangible improvement in your daughter's health. May God help you and your husband that all this will happen very quickly. I think it is superfluous for me to repeat what I have already written in my earlier letters, which is that you should try as much as possible to participate in the preparations that are needed for a Hasidic gathering that will take place in your city. This will be a clear proof that you're confident in God's help, that He will certainly make yours and your husband's heart to rejoice. In other words, if you show that your faith is strong by participating in the preparations for a joyous occasion, even before you have a reason to rejoice, then God will respond by giving you a reason to rejoice. In many other letters, the Rebbe quotes the Zohar, which is the basic Jewish mystical work, which says a person's joy will draw down blessings from heaven. So therefore, that's what we have to, as a blessing. The Rebbe concludes that both of you should have a great deal of satisfaction from your daughter with her husband, the rabbi. So therefore, that we have to be happy, you have to have trust, and again, this is the theme of today's show, is to have faith in God. And now we have faith and intellectual understanding are both required. You ask whether you are supposed to believe with simple, unquestioning faith, or whether you are supposed to use your intellect to investigate and understand. The answer is that you are obligated to do both. Not only is there no contradiction between these two approaches, but in fact each one brings the other to completion. The first step in the service of God and the foundation of all service is simple faith. From the very outset, a Jew is obligated to fulfill the mitzvah that has been called the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of wisdom. The mitzvah, the commandment to know that there is a primary cause of all existence. The Rambam, which we quoted before, Maimonides, discusses this mitzvah at the beginning of his Mishnah Torah, that he encyclopedizes all Jewish law. And it's really big. If I put it on a table, it would be this big. It's very, very large, and you're supposed to learn that, all the laws, but on the other hand, that this is the first law that you should know. The first thing you know as there's faith in God. And in the language of the Zohar, which we quoted the Zohar before, which is the basic work of Jewish mysticism, this commandment is prior to all the other commandments, and it obligates us to acquire a knowledge of God, etc. So again, what the Rebbe continues, but the basic idea so far is faith is very good, but there has to be as much knowledge as you can. And the Talmud says, if you did not work hard and yet succeeded, meaning, well, I did it, I did nothing, do not believe it. You cannot just get away with doing nothing and say you're successful. Every Jew is obligated to tire himself and exhaust his intellect in order to know and understand God to his maximum extent. True, the ability of a human being to understand God is limited, and with respect to everything that is beyond his understanding, he should live with his basic and simple faith. For a more complete explanation of this, you should study the Samexetic's explanation of the mitzvah to believe in God. This topic is also discussed in another Hasidic book, Kuntris, the pamphlet of Torah Hasidus, chapter 13, and several other places. The Rebbe says you have to understand what you can do. You have to understand that you have to believe in God, but you have to learn as much as you can to try to understand. Now this is very interesting. Studying Chassidus will protect a person's faith. Greetings and blessings. Those who merited to enjoy the light of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of Chassidus, and his students, and their students in turn succeeded in implementing in their daily life the instructions of the Arizal Isaac Luria, who is also lived in the 1500s. He's a major commentary of the Jewish Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism in our day. That in our generation it's a mitzvah to reveal this wisdom, meaning the inner dimension of the Torah, the deeper secrets of the Torah. In the olden days, for example, that you had to be a special student, the top-notch students to learn the Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism. But from the Arizal, from Isaac Luria, he says that everybody should learn as much as you can. In addition, when the Baal Shem Tov asked the Mashiach, he went to heaven and said, "When's the Messiah coming? When are you going to arrive?" The answer was, "When the wellsprings of your teachings will spread outward." Hence, the necessity to study the teaching of the students of the Baal Shem Tov is beyond all doubt. Even so, in the previous generation, it was possible to think that it would be enough to spend only a very short time studying these teachings, because one could be confident that young boys and yeshiva rabbinical students would not be involved in philosophical speculation. They would never meet people who would question them about their inner spiritual obligations or matter of faith, etc., etc. They were, in a certain sense, ghettoized in a cocoon, and therefore they could learn and everything was good. But in our generation, especially in recent years, when persecution and mass murder, talking about World War II, brought havoc and confusion to the whole world, boys and young men are confronted by extremely difficult tests, and sad to say, there is no way to avoid an encounter with people who will try to raise doubts about everything that is holy, even about the fundamental beliefs of Judaism. Hence, it is necessary for a student to know what is contained in the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov and a student's students, which is a part of our Holy Torah, as our sages have said. Everything that an accomplished scholar will reveal in the future was already given to Moses at Mount Sinai. So you could say, well, I want to read Bible or Talmud, that's real Torah, but not these newer ideas, for example, from the Rebbe, and the Rebbe saying that's not true. It's all from Moses. And a student who knows the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov will not be affected by what he may hear from other people. Even if you can find someone today who will say that he is confident that his son or his relative will never meet people who are not God-fearing, righteous, and in possession of complete faith, an attitude that contradicts the teachings of our sages, that a person should not be confident even about himself, experience has nevertheless shown us that the opposite is true. And even according to such a person's words, there is no way to rule out the possibility of such an encounter. According to a well-known principle in Jewish law, whenever there is a danger to life, or even a remote possibility of danger, it is permitted to violate the Shabbos, the Sabbath laws, etc. So therefore, if a person's in danger of having these ideas in their head, they have to learn the deeper meanings of the Torah, that'll keep their faith strong. Faith in the living God, not a belief in abstractions. Greetings and blessings. Since everything that happens is a result of specific divine providence, including this exchange of letters, I feel it is my obligation, and perhaps my privilege as well, to bring something to your attention, although I request your forgiveness for doing so. This is that every created being, and especially a human being, who is the most distinguished of all creations, is obligated to use every possibility that is given to him in order to increase the amount of goodness, righteousness, and justice in the world. Experience has shown us that the only way to be sure that a person's efforts to increase the amount of goodness in the world will lead to enduring results, and what is even more relevant, that he will not come to say that the wicked are righteous or that the evil is good. It'll be a totally distorted kind of attitude, is when this thinking that directs his efforts is based upon a faith in the living God, who in actual fact supervises and controls every occurrence in the world, down to the smallest detail. For when that faith is missing, a human being is capable of even the worst crimes. I just want to bring out also an interesting idea. Crime is such a major idea today, and people do such horrible things, shooting people and the like. So what's the advice? Well, you could say death penalty, and people say more police in the world. But really here the Rebbe's answering the real answer, and that is, if there's a faith in living God, if people have faith in God, then they won't do any kind of horrible things. No guarantee, but it'll be less. And indeed, we saw this happen precisely in our own generation, in a nation that was on the highest level of culture, and he does mean Germany, a nation that was famous for its scientific research and philosophical analysis, and even for its system of ethical teachings. And yet, when the opportunity arose, the cultured citizens of that nation became the most horrendous murderers, even from the simplest perspective, and even in comparison to the behavior of predatory animals. I'm sure that for someone like you, there is no need to elaborate on all this. When contemplating this, one comes to the conclusion that what is required is a faith in the living God, and not an abstract faith that he exists in the seventh heaven, but is not concerned about what happens in the physical world, or that he only supervises things in a general way, but is not involved in all the details. For as we saw, it was just that kind of belief that led to the acts of the insanity mentioned earlier, just because of World War II and the Holocaust, because a human being is born with an impulse towards evil. Even for ourselves, we have no other protection or guarantee that we will be able to walk securely upon the path of goodness and justice unless we possess a simple but yet firm belief that the first of the Ten Commandments, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. For such a faith, it has a clear and an inescapable consequence, namely, you shall not, which is the second commandment, you shall not have any other gods, none whatsoever. And such a faith will bring a person to fulfill the practical commandments in his daily life, commandments such as remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, and then, and only then, can we be assured that a person will also observe, do not murder and do not covet, which are another two of the Ten Commandments. Since I have been told by the young men that you are gifted with an ability to influence a rather wide circle, may it be God's will that you should utilize this ability in the way described above, and the merit of the public will assist you, and with respect and with blessing for good news. So the Rebbe really empowers, I can always say, different people, no matter who they are, to do the right thing, the good thing. And again, even if you're doing the good thing, it's also very important, of course, to teach other people. Acting on faith. Deep within himself, every Jew knows that the Torah is the true life of his soul. And even when he does not understand this intellectually, he knows it through the power of faith that exists within him. For all Jews are believers and the sons of believers. Not only that, but since he knows it by means of faith, it is more true to him in a deeper part of his being than if he knew it by means of understanding, or even if it from the verification of his own eyes. We see clearly that when a person acts on the basis of faith, the action is performed with more completeness and with more certainty than when he acts on the basis of intellectual conviction. The reason for this is not just that a person's intellect is sometimes weak and confused. The main reason is that even when his intellect is strong, a person has the ability to do the opposite of what his intellect tells him. This is because a person and his intellect are two separate entities. Sometimes they work together, and sometimes they are in conflict. But when a person acts on the basis of faith, and his faith is genuine, then he will perform the action with integrity and wholeness, with complete certainty and a tremendous power of conviction. In fact, the certainty that comes from faith is greater than the certainty that comes from direct visual perception. It is explained in the literature of Chassidus. We talked about Chassidus before, the deeper parts of Torah, that hearing is not the same as seeing, which means that when a person sees something for himself, it is more real to him than if he only heard it about it. Nevertheless, the verification that results from visual perception is also not absolute, since a person who is skilled at sleight of hand is able to convince an audience that they saw things that really never happened. As stated in the Mishnah, but if it was done through sleight of hand, he is not liable. If a person did an act and he seemed to do something wrong, but it was just a trick, so a trick's a trick, and that's not really an action. From this we understand, although the certainty of visual perception is great, it is still not comparable to the verification that results from faith. And all of this is true about the faith that is found in all human beings, even among non-Jews. And this is even more the case when we consider the faith that exists within the Jewish people, who were created from the very beginning to be believers and the sons of believers. Going into more detail, there are two aspects of faith. The word believers indicates a faith that comes from the person himself, while the term sons of believers speaks of a faith that is based on what one's parents believed. There are people in the world, even non-Jews, who will maintain their parents' custom throughout their entire lives, not because of any strong personal convictions, but just because they rely on what their parents believed. And Jews have an even greater ability to live this way, since according to the Torah, Jewish fathers and their children are a part of the same unified existence. And as is written, your children will take the place of your forefathers. The most perfect kind of faith includes both of these aspects. The individual has his own faith, and he also relies on his parents' beliefs. Both of these aspects are mentioned by the Torah in the pasuk and the verse. This is my God, and I will glorify him. This is the God of my fathers, and I will elevate him. The first part of the verse, my God, refers to the way a person relates to God by means of his own faith, while the second part, the God of my fathers, refers to his ability to relate to God on the basis of what his parents believed. It should be noted that faith will continue to be important even after the Mashiach, the Messiah, arrives. May it happen very soon. In the literature of Chassidus, we find an explanation for the fact that the Messiah will be both a teacher and a king. He will be called a teacher because of the things he will teach the Jewish people to understand, and their understanding will be so clear that it will be like a visual perception. Nevertheless, he will also be called a king because of the things that will be accepted even at the time of the basis of the faith. And just one more paragraph and we'll conclude today. What is relevant to our discussion is this: because the Jewish people are endowed with the power of faith, since they are believers and the sons of believers, every Jewish person believes that the Torah is the source of his inner spiritual life. It is the life of his soul, but a person still needs to reveal his faith so that it will permeate the revealed parts of his soul, and so that even in the actual conduct of his daily life, he will clearly recognize and feel that Torah is the life in his soul. And if anyone will argue that such conduct is impossible in the reality of the world, we can bring a story from the Russian, in any case, then in the people in Russia, even though that they didn't have any means of anything, they still had tremendous faith and they remained faithful to God. Thank you very much.